Hey, welcome back to HowToBBQRight. I've got a big, beautiful pork shoulder today that I'm going to show you how to cook out on your smoker. Now this pork shoulder is great because it's the Boston butt and the picnic all connected together as one. I know everybody's seen the Boston butts for sale split up. This is what we're used to cooking in the KCBS world and for the pork entry, or even you find them at your local butcher store. It's got the big, nice money muscle on this end. So it wins you the checks in those contests. But a lot of people overlook this back end, and that's the picnic end. And there's some great meat. These muscles back here have a ton of great flavor, and it's actually a different texture, different colored meat than the front end. So you cook them all together and it combines for some awesome barbecue. That's what I'm going to show you today. You'll notice on the pork shoulder, this is the inside, and we're going to get a lot of bark on this area. And the shoulder also still has the skin attached to it. A lot of times I'll go ahead and take some of this skin off, and today I'm going to show you how I cut the cap. Basically, I just leave a good bit on the shank portion down here and cut me a thin line. Now once it's free, you can kind of use your hands as a guide and just start skinning it back a little bit. We're just going to peel this part of the cap off because we don't need it. It's a barrier. It's going to, we wouldn't be able to get any rub on the inside of this meat with it on there. We wouldn't be able to get our smoke on it. So I take it off, and even when I'm cooking Memphis in May, we do this very same thing. We come in and we peel this hide back. A lot of times I'll take it and make me a little finger hole. That way I can hold it good. Lets me put pressure on it, kind of pull it up as I'm trimming. So I've got the cap off. That's what it looked like. And this is garbage. We don't use it for anything. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could probably render it down some, maybe make some cracklings, but I'm not going to do that today. With the cap off, you can see I've started to expose some meat, but I've still got a pretty good thick layer of fat over parts of this shoulder. And I'm going to spin it around and show you where I really want to get cleaned up, because this is where I'm going to get a lot of good bark from, and this is that layer of false cap that's right underneath the fat. So you just take a knife and kind of go real shallow, taking this false cap, the fat off this false cap. I'm just working my knife underneath the fat, trying not to go too deep. So I've got the false cap cleaned up really well, and you'll see it's just a thin layer of really lean meat that's in between the two fat layers. There's another layer of membrane right underneath this on top of the tubes, the different muscles in the butt. But I like to leave this layer on because my seasoning, my rubs, my glaze at the end, all that smoke's going to build up and make a beautiful bark. And this false cap will come off in one piece, and we'll show you how it's done. That's my favorite part of the shoulder. Now I'm just going to expose a little more bark on the rest of the area of the shoulder here. Take off this sinew and any of this thick fat. You don't have to get it all. We want to be able to get smoke penetration, get our flavors going, and get to the meat. All of this is a barrier, so we're taking this off. If you're cooking at home and you just want to chop this shoulder up, that's fine if you want to leave it on there. But I like to take that extra time and clean it up where it really makes a beautiful presentation. You can see it doesn't take me too long to get it cleaned up here, and just taking this extra time is going to make the barbecue better for your guest or impress anybody that you're cooking this shoulder for, I guarantee you. So you can see I got the top part of the shoulder, the fat side, cleaned up really nice. This side is ready for seasoning, ready for injections. But we're going to flip it over and just see if there's anything on the other side that we need to take off. If there's a gland in there, if there's any of this thick stuff, I want to get all that out. So I always just start cutting kind of right in the seam there and just working away some of that trash. This is not what I would want to serve a judge especially, or a guest. Anybody I'm eating doesn't want to eat that piece of barbecue. There's a pretty big vein in it. There's still some blood that's coagulated. We're going to get all that out. But you don't have to worry about getting too deep or you'll separate the shoulder. Just cut out what you see. Also, up here in the money muscle end, I always like to free up a little bit of this fat too. There's a decent little vein or artery you can see runs right along there. I like to clean that out. I don't want the flavors of that left in the pork. So we're looking good. We've cut out Any of our blood spots that we could have had, that tough connective tissue is gone. The rest of this we're going to render. It's going to make for one awesome shoulder. So now we've got this shoulder trimmed. I'm really liking the way it looks. You know, if you noticed, I trimmed off a pretty good, substantial amount of it. It's probably about 2 pounds if you had to weigh what I trimmed off. So that took that 20-pound shoulder down to an 18-pound shoulder. And that's going to be critical in our cook times. I mean, you know, a shoulder cooks about an hour per pound. So we're looking at an 18-hour cook still on this big piece of meat. And that's, you know, a lot of times it turns people off on cooking one because it's a big commitment and you need a good sized cooker to handle it. But I'm telling you, the reward is definitely worth it. So the first thing, we're going to get that AP layer on. That's my salt, pepper, and garlic. And I'm just going to start on the meat side. This is going to be the downside during this whole cooking process. But I want to get a good base layer of that AP on it. This is before I put a binder, before I put the mustard to it that's going to hold the rub on. I'm just seasoning it with my AP. I'm going to go ahead and do both sides. You'll notice I'm not seasoning the skin because I want to protect that skin during the cooking process. Keep it nice and clean, and I want it to get a golden color. I don't want it to burn up. That's kind of my showpiece on a shoulder, is that I protected that shank end portion of skin. It's going to make it look really, really beautiful for your presentation. So now that we have the AP on, it's time to get that mustard slather, which is going to be our binder. So I'm going to go ahead and get a little on this side. We're just going to rub that light layer of mustard in. Then I'm going to flip it over and get the other side. So now let's come back with a light layer on this side. And make sure you get the edges. You want to get the money muscle up there, of course. Get all the little nooks and crannies in it. Now we're ready for the barbecue rub. Now at this point, you know, you can use whatever barbecue season you want to. This is really where you're getting that traditional barbecue flavor. I'm always using the BBQ Rub with Killer Hogs. But hey, if you got your favorite one, go to it. And that's what it's about when you're cooking barbecue. You're wanting to meld the smoke with the rub, with the sauce, with the injection. It's all got to jive perfectly. That's what makes good barbecue. Notice I didn't get the collar back here on this end. I still kept it nice and clean. I'll lift it up, get the money muscle in here on the edge. I'm going to turn it over. Put the rub to this side. Kind of use my hand as a guide up here to keep it off the collar. So now it's time for the injection, and we're using an injection to not only add more moisture to the shoulder, but it's also bringing some flavor to it. And I'm using this Butcher's Open Pit pork flavor, which goes great with butts, picnics, whole shoulders, even whole hogs. To mix it up, I used a half a cup of the Open Pit pork and 32 ounces of apple juice. Whisked it up really, really well until it's all dissolved. And then I strain it a little bit and get it in a container that I can shoot up with my injector. I really want to concentrate on the key areas, the big muscles in this pork shoulder. So of course, I'm going to go into money muscle. That's one that we really want some flavor. I'm going to pump it about 3 times every time I stick it. I'm just spreading it out. And you can see as I'm doing it, some of it's coming back. It's going to happen. You can't stop it, but I know I'm getting it in there. And I'm just spacing, you know, about 1 inch apart on my sticks, trying to get about 20 ounces at least of this injection in this shoulder. We blowed this thing up like a tire. I'm also going to go back underneath that cap, that little bit of hide that we left. Try to shoot it all the way back up under the leg bone. We'll spin it around, stick it right in the end. And that's a fully injected shoulder. Now I know this was 32 ounces of liquid when I started, and I pumped, you know, just about all of it, probably 24 ounces at least, inside this shoulder. So it's going to have a lot of moisture. The phosphates that are in this Butcher's injection are going to help it retain some of that moisture, and then all that flavor that was in there is going to get left behind as we render out some of that moisture. But I know that it's going to be nice and juicy when it gets done. So now that the shoulder's seasoned up, we've got it pumped up full of injection, all that extra moisture, it's time to get the fire going. But I always like to let the shoulder sit out, you know, about 1 hour, room temp, before I put it on. Kind of lets it come up to room temperature. Also, you know, lets the rub start melting a little bit. And Now, as we injected it there, it did maybe wash off a little bit. The last thing I'll do is I'll come back and just give it another little top coat of rub here. The injection is going to melt it right in. It's going to make sure that we get a good bark going. Also, I mentioned that I've got to protect this cap during the cooking process. So I've got to get a little bit of cooking oil on it to help it brown. And then I'm going to cover it with a cotton towel the whole time it's smoking. That way it stays nice and golden. And every time we baste, we'll come back and I'll show you, we'll spray this cap. So that's it. We're going to let the shoulder hang out here for about an hour. We'll go outside, get the smoker fired up. We're going to come back, we're going to show you how we're going to cook this 18-hour whole shoulder. Stick around. All right, we're out at our smoker now, and I'm cooking today on my Ole Hickory MM. This is a new one. I know you've seen me cook on Ole Hickory pits before, but this is a new one that I'm working with. I'm going to be cooking this whole shoulder on it today. So I brought it up to temp. We're sitting at about 225 degrees. I'm going to go ahead and get my shoulder on the rack. Now when I'm cooking just one shoulder on this cooker, I'm going to just center it up right in the middle, make sure my cap is still covered. We've got it sprayed. Then I'm just going to kind of form the shoulder the way I want it to sit. Now it's ready for the smoke. So I'm going to close the ace here. Tell you a little bit about this cooker. This is one of the newer models that Ole Hickory's often more in line for your competition cookers. It's for guys that need a smaller footprint that want to still be able to cook a pretty good bit of meat. This one has the same frame as a regular CTO, but the main difference is it doesn't have gas. So today we're cooking straight charcoal. I've got some of these hickory wood blocks that I've got from Ole Hickory. It's a new product they're using as well, but it's just straight seasoned hickory, and they already have them cut into cubes for you, so they really have a good uniform shape, good dense hickory wood, and that's what I'm going to be using for my smoke today. So I'm going to set the ace on about 225, and I'm just going to let it hold its temp, get a nice little smoke rolling, and we're just going to start monitoring. There's no need worrying about internal temperatures this early in the game, because the first part of this long cook is going to be just getting some smoke on it. Then we're going to go to that wrap stage where the internal temperature starts getting crucial. But remember, it's going to be about an hour per pound, so we're looking at 17, 18-hour cook with this big whole shoulder. So stick with me and we'll show you how this process works, show you what an awesome shoulder looks like here at the end. Okay, while our shoulder is outside cooking on the smoker, we got to start thinking about how we're going to keep it moist during that cooking process. Because this is such a long smoke, the outside's going to dry out. We want that bark to form, but we also want to keep some moisture on it. That's when we use a baste. I'm going to show you how I make a baste for pork. This goes for butts, whole shoulder, ribs, even whole hog. It's a great simple baste that's a real easy recipe. I start with just 2 cups of hot water and then just a bottle of cheap zesty Italian dressing. And I'm using the hot water because I want it to dissolve some of the rub I'm going to put in it. And I'm going to use about a 1/4 cup of rub. I'm not really measuring it, just kind of eyeballing it. We're keeping that same flavor profile going that we've used to season the pork shoulder with too. Just a little bit of Worcestershire and a little bit of soy sauce. If you're keeping up with measurements, about a tablespoon will do. Just mix it up. Now you've got a quick, simple baste. It's going to keep that pork nice and moist while it's out there smoking. You want to do this every couple of hours as needed when you notice it drying out. All right, we're back out at the Ole Hickory. It's been about 2 hours, still sitting in that 225, 230 heat range, which is perfect. We want to go ahead and open it up, take a look at our pork shoulder and see how it's doing. So you can see we're starting to get some color on it, but it is starting to look a little dry, and this is the perfect time to go ahead and start your basting. So it doesn't matter what cooker you're cooking on at this point, you just want to make sure you're using something large enough that's going to hold a whole shoulder and that you can get some extended cook times on. So I just put a drip pan right underneath the shoulder. This helps keep my smoker clean. It's going to catch some of this baste as it runs off. And I'm not brushing it, I'm just kind of dabbing the baste on with a mop. And we just want to moisten it up a little. You want to be a little quick when you do this. You don't want to lose all your heat because when you're looking, you're not cooking. So we've got the shoulder nice and basted. We've moistened it up. We want to do this as quick as possible, but we don't want to forget our shoulder cap because we're trying to make it look really good. So I want to take the towel back, You can see how it still has a good white look. It's not getting too dark. Moisten it up some, just with a little cooking spray. Put your towel right back on to protect it. So now we're just gonna keep an eye on it. Another hour and a half, 2 hours, we'll come back out, take a look, baste again. We're gonna do that until we get all the bark we want to form. We start getting some dark color on top. That's when I know it's time to wrap. We'll start monitoring internals. All right, I've been basting this pork shoulder every 2 hours, just like that first baste we did, until I get the bark just how I want it. We're 6 hours in now, and I know it's time to start thinking about wrapping it. I'm gonna be about in the 150, 160 degree range, and that's where I wanna catch that bark before it starts getting too dark. So let's open it up, take a look, see how our shoulder's doing, see if it's go ahead time to get it wrapped up. And yeah, right away I can see, you know, I noticed I started building a really good bark on it, starting to get a real good color. You know, it's getting that barbecue look to it, and that's what I want my bark to have on my whole shoulders. So for the setup, we're ready to wrap this whole shoulder. We're gonna have to handle it, so you're gonna need a pair of glove liners and some nitrile gloves or something on your hands because it's hot. Now the setup I'm using today is just one of the pork racks to make picking up the pork shoulder easier when it's done down inside a large pan. That's the same pan I was using to catch those drippings to keep my smoker clean. Now you can wrap these shoulders up individually like we do butts just with aluminum foil, but a large piece of meat like this is much easier to move around on a rack in a pan. It's gonna also help with cleanup. So let's get our shoulder in the pan on the rack. It's still pretty firm at this point, so it's not hard to move. So I'll put it up here where you can see it real well. Now, I want to get some more baste on it. I want to get my probe thermometer in it so I can monitor that internal temperature. Also going to spray my cap one more time before we cover it up. So we're going to hit it with one more baste here, just for a little extra added moisture. Let's get one more spray. We've protected that cap. It's got a good looking color going on it. And we'll just go ahead and leave this towel on it the whole time it's wrapped. Now we're going to show you where we're going to put our probe thermometer. I like to go right behind the butt section in front of any of the blade bones that's in here. So I'm using my dot thermometer today, this ThermalWorks dot, just to tell the internal temp. And I'm going to stick it back in the meaty part. I don't want to feel bone, and I don't have to be too deep. I just want a good probe, and that's going to let me see. We're reading about 148. It'll probably go up to about 150 before I get the foil and get it shut up. That's perfect. Now I'm just going to tear off some foil. The foil's going to lock in the heat, lock in that moisture. It's going to let us speed up through that stall that we're going to hit when we get about 170 degrees. If you don't wrap it, it's going to stall out and make that cook even longer. So we're going to speed it up just a little bit by putting it in the pan and wrapping it. So now the hard part's really over. You know, we've added the smoke to it. We've held our fire steady there at 225, 230, right in that range. We're not going to add any more smoke at this point. We're just going to keep that steady temp going. We're going to watch this thermometer as it goes up. When it gets to 192 degrees, I know this whole shoulder is going to be done. You know, we've still got a long cook ahead of us. That's okay because we're taking it low and slow. We're not trying to pressure the shoulder. So stick with me. I'll show you how the cook goes, how we're going to glaze it, and the best part, we're always going to get to try it. Stick around. All right, as you can tell, my alarm's going off, and this has been one long cook, but I finally hit that 192 mark. So just because we hit that 192 mark, that doesn't mean that I'm done. I've still got to push it a little bit further. I'm looking for 195 to 198, that magic point where that shoulder's just going to be pull apart tender and I'm going to get those bones out. But I take it to 192 because this is where I'm going to put that final glaze on it for these last few degrees. Really make it look pretty because we had it wrapped in foil, and that's going to kind of take away some of that look we went for because it's really breaking it down. Now we're going to gain all that back by putting the glaze on it, and the glaze is simple. It's just my barbecue sauce. Still maintaining that same temperature, so if you're cooking along at home, it's been a long day and I'm about to run out of light, but we're going to make it through it. That's why I started early this morning when it was still barely light outside. As you can see, I like to say that shoulders have this internal thermometer. This bone has just been drawed back so much and it's kind of spitting it out. We've got a lot of rendering here where that fat's broke down on top, and it's going to be perfect. So let's start glazing. And all I'm using is just a bottle of the barbecue sauce. You can use your favorite barbecue sauce here. I'm just gonna put a little on top. Go ahead and take my probe out. Don't need it anymore because I know it's done. This is where we can cover up any flaws that we might have had from breaking it down. We're just gonna put this sauce on it. Now I'm gonna get a brush and just kind of lightly brush it down where we're gonna make that bark. Go ahead and paint the bone up where it looks good. And you can probably see on the video how much juice is rendered out of this shoulder. It's got the rack's keeping it up out of it some, but there's a lot of juice still in there. So let's see how our cat did. Look at that. Still got a pretty golden color. And I also like to take a little of that, just kind of pretty this cap up a little bit, make it shine. We're almost to the point where we got some amazing whole pork shoulder barbecue. Stick around. We need about 30-45 minutes. Let this glaze kind of melt down, let it tighten up that bark. We're going to take it inside, get it on the cutting board, and show you how to break into that whole pork shoulder. It's been a long cook, but I know it's been worth it. All right, it's been about 35 minutes, and I had to peek in and see how we were doing with this final glaze on this shoulder. I want to show you what it looks like. You can see how that sauce is tightened up on it, how it's really created this bark, how that shoulder's kind of jiggly. That's what I want to see. I know now that it's ready to come off the smoker. The bones are ready to pop out of it, and it's going to be just pull apart tender. So we're going to take it inside, and I still need it to rest a little bit. I'm going to get it out of this pan of juice inside, let it sit in a clean pan just for 15 minutes, let some of the heat get off of it so we can break into it, show you what it looks like to break down this whole shoulder after we've cooked it for a little over 17 hours to get to this stage. Normally, you know, you could hold this right now. You could put a little bit of foil over it, hold it in a dry cooler for a little while if you wanted to, if it's going to be a few hours before you eat it. But I'm not going to wait tonight. It's been all day. I'm ready to get into this, so we're going to give it about 15 minutes inside. Let's take it in and we'll show you what we're working with. All right, I brought the whole shoulder back inside. I've had it rest in about 15 minutes. Before we start breaking into it, let's just talk about what we did today. When I started out with this shoulder, it was 20 pounds. Bought it at the local store, trimmed it up a little bit. You know, we split that fat cap, pulled it off, but we left that false cap so I can create this nice bark underneath it. And that's one of the first parts we're gonna pull off here in just a minute. We seasoned it with a base layer of that salt, pepper, and garlic, my all-purpose blend. And then we put just a little mustard on it to bind all that seasoning and to hold the rub that we sprinkled over the top. And that was just my favorite barbecue rub, and you can use whatever there. Then we mixed up the butcher's open pit injection with apple juice, shot it all, about 24 ounces, spread it all out through the whole shoulder. Then we fired up the pit, and I let the shoulder sit out at room temp for about an hour before we put it on. Now, that Ole Hickory did its job today. I mean, those cookers are some flat competition, money-making machines, and you can't hardly beat them. I've been cooking on one a long time. This was my first cook on that new model, the Ace MM, which is all charcoal and wood fired, and I'm really happy the way it ran today. I mean, I sat there in that 230 zone, right where I wanted to be, and burned about one bag, 20 pounds of charcoal. That was it for this whole cook, and it went a little over 17 hours. Now, the first part of that cook was when I had the charcoal basket full. I had some of that good hickory chunks in there. I was getting some good smoke until I got the color I wanted. We did keep it wet, moist with the baste, and that was that simple Italian dressing, water, Worcestershire soy, and about a quarter cup of rub. That just went on every 2 hours as needed when you noticed it drying out. Once I got that bark the color I wanted, that was when it was time to get it covered up, to get it in a pan, get it on that pork rack, kind of braising in that pan, holding the air in tight on it. That's what renders all the fat in that 18-pound shoulder. You notice I had a lot of juice that I got out of there, so we brought it in and it was done. I got it out of that juice and let it sit here and rest. You can keep that and save it. You know, if you're putting this meat up when you get through with it, you want to add some moisture back to it, just get the fat off that. Let it cool down in the refrigerator in a bowl, scoop that tallow off, and then put that juice back with your pork. And when you reheat it, it's going to be just as moist and juicy as it is right now. The last thing we did, once we got it up to about 192 degrees, that was when it was time to get the full off and set the bark. And when I went back with the barbecue sauce, a light coat, and just covered everything, prettied it up a little bit, and then let the heat finish it that last 3 or 4 degrees for about 45 minutes. That's all it took. You'll notice we took care of what hide was left over the shank. It didn't bust, you know, it's got a real pretty gold color. Now, when you're sitting here with a shoulder like this, the hard thing to do is not dive in. And I've had about as much as I can stand. So without further ado, we're gonna start breaking this shoulder down. Now, the first thing that I usually do is go ahead and pull the bones out. So I told you about that instant thermometer that shoulders have in them. Well, when they're done, it'll come out bone clean like that, already starting to chalk up. I'm gonna lay that shank bone or blade bone right there. Now we'll go in. First, I wanna get off some of this false cap. That's that good bark. And man, I'm telling you, that is awesome stuff. I'll lay it over here on the platter. I'm gonna get me a bite of that here in just a little bit. That's what I always go for first. Those beautiful bark pieces. There's a piece right here that's just to die for. And look at that color that meat's got. Good pink underneath it where you can see the smoke got to it. Juicy as it can be. All that beautiful bark on that side. Now I'm gonna go to the money muscle where these tubes are in here. And this is really some of your best part of a shoulder. They're tender and moist and delicious. You don't forget about that money muscle right up front. You can take that off. All of this part is just tender, juicy, moisture is just wringing out of it. I'm not gonna wait anymore, I'm gonna get a bite. I don't get to do that when I'm sitting in front of a judge, I'm giving it to them. But wow, that's amazing. You just don't get all that when you cook the butt separate and the picnic separate. There's something about a whole shoulder. The way that meat breaks down, holds that moisture in there. It's got so much flavor, it's just awesome. I'm gonna go ahead and start breaking it, muscling it out a little more. Another good tube out. And you'll see it's just falling apart. So I'm running my hands through it. And I'm just kind of separating the muscles. Now I like to go ahead and take that cap off. There's some really, really good meat right in here. So I've got to get busy pulling the rest of this shoulder, getting it ready to serve. Hey, if you ever get the chance to do a whole shoulder, give it a try. I mean, it takes a long time, but it makes an awesome presentation. You get some really good meat, and you're really gonna get to know that smoker by holding that temperature steady that whole long cook. Thanks for checking out our videos here at How to Barbecue Right. If you like what we're doing, subscribe to our channel. You can always follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We're gonna keep putting out these videos all year long. We'll see you next time.